So joining me today, I've got two special ambassadors from the American Heart Association because Wear Red Day is this Friday, February 3rd. So I've got Brandi Aubrey. She's the Go Red Women Ambassador and Heart Survivor. And I've got Karen Dionne, who's also a Go Red for Women Ambassador and Stroke Survivor. And the interesting thing about you two is that you're both very young. And I think most people associate heart disease, heart attacks, anything really heart related. Most of the time we all assume, I'll be fine until I'm in my 70s.
Exactly. Yeah. I was diagnosed when I was 2.5 years old with a heart condition. It's called aortic stenosis. And what it means is my aortic valve is misshapen. So it doesn't open as wide as everyone else's. And if the aortic valve doesn't open very wide, that means the blood flow can't get through. So over time, the blood flow was backing up into my heart and the oxygenated blood wasn't able to get out of my heart through that aortic valve, up through the aorta to the rest of the body. When we were told when I was 2.5, this means someday you'll have to have surgery and have that valve replaced. But usually it doesn't happen until you're in your 60s, 70s or so. We had annual checkups growing up, take a day off of school, go in, have all the heart checks, and just make sure that everything's maintained in a steady level growing up. Once I hit 21, I'd maxed out of my pediatric care. So I was sent to a new cardiologist. And we went in, we got the baseline tests, and he looked at me and said, you know, you probably don't need to come in every year. You can probably come in every, 2 to 3, maybe 3 to 5 years.
Wow, 3 to 5? That's a big window right there.
Yeah, it kind of freaked me out a bit. And I was like, really, can we maybe just do every other year for a while? I feel a little better with that. When I was 23, I started noticing I was having what I thought were some symptoms of heart problems. I was getting dizzy spells. I was getting lightheaded. I was getting some tightness in my chest. They went in, they took the pictures, and he looks at it and he said, oh, you're fine. Come back in a few years. A couple years pass. I go back in. I'm like, okay, I am starting to get blackouts now. I'm getting burning on the left side of my neck. I'm getting tingling in my fingers. My jaw's hurting. This has got to be related to my heart. If you look in the textbook, and I actually brought a textbook with me to this appointment, I said, look, this is what happens when this condition goes bad. And he looks at me and he pats my leg and he goes, oh, honey, young women always tend to overreact to things. And I looked at him and I went, excuse me? And he laughs and he goes, young women tend to be dramatic. I'm sure it's fine. Your heart's fine. I'll take a couple of more pictures and we'll look at it. He takes the echo. He just kind of glances at it with me in the room. And he goes, see, you're fine. But I'm concerned with these dizzy spells. You might have a brain tumor. I said, wait a second. I've got a diagnosed heart problem.
Yeah.
All 4 of my grandparents have passed away from heart disease. So there's a family history.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not my heart? He said, no, we need to get you checked for a brain tumor, maybe a seizure disorder. So I had checks for a brain tumor, no brain tumor. I was sent to a seizure specialist and I was put on anti-seizure medications for about 6 months. When you're on anti-seizure medications and you don't have seizures, you get a lot of side effects and a lot of weird symptoms that happen.
So that's going to be even more confusing.
Exactly. So I'm on these things and my speech is getting slurred. I'm having a hard time, picking up. My fine motor skills are kind of dropping off. I'm having all these other symptoms. And meanwhile, all my heart symptoms are getting worse too. So we go back in, they take me off those meds. I'm like, please, somebody, I know this isn't right. So my doctor does one more ultrasound and says, look, you're fine. Young women overreact. It's probably a lot of stress. You need to learn to manage the stress in your life and things will be better. And come back in 5 to 7 years or when you have a real symptom.
Oh my gosh. So now they're telling you to come back with even a longer stretch of period.
Yeah. Or if I have a real symptom.
Miserable. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it was kind of insane. So I didn't go back to the doctor for a few years and my symptoms are getting worse and my regular, family doc and my OBGYN and everybody is noticing my blood pressure is elevating each year. I'm gaining some weight, but they're all thinking, oh, well, when you gain weight, your blood pressure goes up and, everybody's attributing it to other things. And I keep getting told that I'm just overly stressed.
Lots of passing the buck.
Exactly. Exactly. So at the age of 31, I have a bug bite on the back of my leg when I'm having dinner with some friends. Go into the doctor the next day because it's a huge welt on the back of my leg. And I said, this just isn't right. So they take my blood pressure. They retake my blood pressure. They're taking out both sides of my body. I'm thinking, I know, my blood pressure is always low. No big deal. After they've retaken it a few times and they've looked at the bug bite, the doctor comes in. She takes it, looks at the bug bite and says, okay, I've got some good news and bad news for you. I said, all right, what's that? She said, the good news is you have MRSA. I said, wait, MRSA's the good news?
From the bug bite.
From the bug bite. I contracted MRSA from a spider bite. And that's the good news. And I said, how's that good news? And she said, oh, because we can treat that with some antibiotics. I said, oh my gosh, then what's the bad news?
Yeah.
And she kind of chuckles. She goes, well, we think that your heart's gone really bad. Your blood pressure is 189 over 129. Your heart's beating at 99 beats a minute, and we can only find your pulse on one side of your body. We can't even find it on the other.
How does that work? Is it because the valve was on one side? Is that why?
Yep, the valve's on one side, and because of that, the valve wasn't opening and closing. And so all the blood was getting backed up through my heart, and so one side of my body, everything was just raging. And on the other side, it was just not really much blood coming through.
You were
so
like this person split down the middle.
Exactly.
Isn't that bizarre?
It was so random. And they said, so we're concerned you might not make it through the weekend, and we want you to go see a new cardiologist.
Well, I think, and now you're thinking, I should have seen a new cardiologist about 5 years ago.
Exactly. Now I'm sitting here thinking, wow, I really should have been my own advocate more. I shouldn't have just said,
and what age
he's a doctor.
were you when this happened? When
31.
You were 31. So it's scary to think that for women that aren't really paying close attention or aren't very good at going to the doctor, I wonder what chance they have. I mean, I feel like you really do have to be very stubborn when you go in or switch doctors and get a second opinion.
Yeah, and the more I look back at it, the more I realize that, because when I went and saw the new doctor, he did a whole bunch of tests that the other doctor never did for baseline tests. I had treadmills, echoes, I had MRIs, CAT scans. They did exploratory cardiac catheters so that they could get blood pressure readings inside my heart. And then they requested records from that other doctor that blew me off.
Yeah. Which sound like pictures. You did pictures twice.
They looked at the pictures from the doctor that blew me off, and they looked at the pictures that they'd just taken. And the sad thing is, that doctor that blew me off, if he'd taken a minute to actually look at the picture, there was an aneurysm on the picture back then. Now it's been 7 years, and the aneurysm's been growing. So now we've found that I've got... my aortic valve is failing. I'm in advanced heart failure. And I've got an aneurysm wrapping around my aorta right where it attaches to my heart.
So you really could have had this aneurysm erupt at any second and just it would have been done.
Yeah. Well,
that's scary.
It's really scary. They tried to stabilize me for some medications to see if they could buy me a little bit more time before surgery while they figured out what to do, because nobody really knew how to treat it. It was a child's-like condition that the valve just didn't open and stuff, that it was misshaped rather than calcified. Usually when you get older and your valve fails, it's because it becomes calcified, so it doesn't... Yeah. Mm-hmm. So nobody really knew how to treat a child's condition in an adult heart. So the doctors are going back and forth. We do another round of tests, and it's determined that I need to go in and have surgery now. So, I had to go in, and at first they thought they could do a cardiac catheter to repair it, but no, they couldn't do that. It would rupture my aneurysm. My aneurysm's growing too quickly. So then we'll do minimally invasive open heart because your insurance doesn't want to cover the aneurysm. We'll just take care of the valve. Yeah, insurance is a whole nother side of the story.
I was just going to say, that's a whole nother show, isn't it?
But then it was finally determined that we had to do full open heart. So I went in and they removed part of my heart, my aortic valve, and my entire ascending aorta. So when you look at a picture of the heart, it's always colored kind of blue and red.
Yeah.
The aorta is that big red thing that comes off the heart and has a big arch on the top and then drops down. So from the heart all the way up to where it starts to arch was replaced on me. They switched everything out and replaced it with a section from a pig.
I was just saying, I assumed it was from a pig or an animal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, usually when they do tissue, they tend to go for pig or cow.
Okay.
But it was all replaced with a pig section for me. And we found out after my surgery, when my surgeon came in to talk to me, he was a little shaky. And so how'd it go? Everything okay? And he said, yeah, I'm really glad we did it today, as we were switching you over to bypass. Your aneurysm was paper thin and bulging and starting to go. So you would not have lasted the rest of the day.
It's so scary. And to be 31 and to have this stuff going on, I mean, that is terrifying. But it's scary that, that you had been so on top of it. That's the freaky part. The come back in 5 to 7 years part is really the clincher for me in that story. Because I'm like, wow, you're coming in with more concerns. And then the last decision is to come back in 5 to 7 years. I feel like that was really strange.
Yeah, it was kind of out of left field there. But everything got replaced, and I was in the hospital for 8 days. and I've never been healthier in my life.
I was going to say, how do you feel? Is it like, do you remember how cruddy you were feeling at the end when half your body was on a treadmill and the other half was asleep, really?
Yeah, pretty much.
And how you feel like on a normal day now?
Well, it's really amazing because having a birth defect meant my entire life I was always having problems. So my hands and feet were always like ice cubes. Walking around in the neighborhood with the kids, with other kids, I'd get winded and everything. Just before my surgery, I couldn't walk 5 feet without getting dizzy and having a hard time breathing. So I can actually, for the first time in my life, and this is so weird to say, I can run. I've never been able to run before. I can run on a treadmill. I don't have any limitations. It's just, ease in. If I start to feel anything, back off a little.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy.
I feel fantastic now. It took a long time to get used to the circulation thing, though.
Yeah.
My hands and feet, I was like, oh my God, they're on fire. I'm like touching people all the time. Aren't they hot? No, they're normal. I'm like, this is normal. This is so weird.
That's the problem. You weren't used to normal.
Yeah.
That's crazy, but it does show, though, like how much of a difference it can make if you're aware of something when it starts early on. That you could have had this fixed years before and been able to run and have a normal life. And again, when yours got to the worst of the worst, you were 31. And again, we know that people assume that they can ignore certain symptoms because they're not elderly.
Well, yeah, and it's really funny because I had full open heart, so I have the big scar on my chest now. Mm-hmm. And when I go out, and normally you can't see it. My surgery was 3 years ago. We call my heart Porky Pumper now because of the big parts.
Little piggy.
And Porky just celebrated his 3rd birthday. We had a birthday party and everything.
Oh, very cute.
And now my scar is kind of a thin white line for the most part, but if I get really hot or really cold, it turns bright red.
Yeah, my mom had open heart surgery, and it's quite the scar right down the middle that you can see.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's pretty wild, but it's funny because I won't hide it. If I want to wear a tank top, I'm going to wear a tank top, and, you're going to see my scar. I'm not going to wear a turtleneck to cover it to make other people feel more comfortable. But it's funny how many times I've been stopped in the store since then, like at the grocery store when I'm out. Is that a heart surgery scar? Oh, you're too young. And I always hear, oh, you're too young for that. Or I've been stopped a few times, oh, wow. So when was your heart attack? Well, I didn't actually have a heart attack. And so it opens up a dialogue to let people know about those sort of things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's pretty wild.
That is a crazy story just because of how many bizarre things happened. And you went, really? Like, how, really, God? I had to go through all that, but at least you came out in the end with a good story, as far as being able to say that you're a survivor and that you figured it out and that you're feeling good now. Now, I've also got Karen Dionne here, and Karen, yours was a different situation. Yours was a stroke, and you're 30. Are you 37 now, or were you 37 when it happened?
I was 37 when it happened.
Okay. So tell me what happened with you and like what your backstory is.
There's so many parallels between my story and Brandi, which is amazing. And being a part of the Go Red for Women Ambassador program with the American Heart Association, the blessed thing is to meet people that you can really relate to, especially as a young adult survivor of something really traumatic. I, too, get stopped and told, you're too young to have had a stroke, which is just an amazing story itself. But for me, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I had flown up to Seattle on a business trip. And I was with my fiancé, Michael, and I was standing in our kitchen. We had a long-distance relationship. And I thought, okay, I'm going to come up and I'll stay with him, and I'll go and do my sales calls and, just kind of work that out.
Normal business trip,
which was a blessing in disguise because I was standing next to Michael in the kitchen in the morning and was making breakfast and started feeling really funny. I started feeling really dizzy, knew something was wrong. It's 9:00 in the morning, and I thought, gosh, I could just go back to sleep, which is so weird. I thought, well,
yeah, why am I so tired?
I just got up. This is not normal. And so, but I started feeling really dizzy, like I wanted to pass out, that pre-blackout feeling. Mm-hmm. So Michael says, why don't you just go sit back down on the couch and I'll finish making breakfast. And okay. And I had a girlfriend up here with me who I also worked with, and we were both going to do sales calls. So she was in the guest room, and I'm sitting down on the couch and just felt like I wanted to slump over on the couch and just go back to sleep. I'm like, gosh, I don't have any energy. This is so weird. But I'm like, I don't have time for this, which you hear about
You're
most.
For a business trip.
We hear about most survivors who say that I don't have time for this. And then that's a really common, typical thing we hear from women, which is why most women die from heart disease or heart attacks or strokes, is because they think it can't happen to them, and it can. especially as a young adult. So luckily, I didn't slump over and go back to sleep. That's one blessing in disguise that, God had his hand in that. Mm-hmm. And so I got up and I said, well, let me go wake up my friend Rita and tell her the breakfast is ready and just kind of get the day going. Mm-hmm. So I get up from the couch, and as I'm walking to the guest room, I'm holding on to the couch. I'm holding on to the wall. I'm like, this isn't right. Mm-hmm. When your body just isn't right.
Yeah.
So I make it to our room and I knock on the door and said, hey, breakfast is ready. Come out whenever you're ready. It's not a rush. And as I'm walking back to the kitchen, by this time, my symptoms are getting worse and just more odd. And I'm standing there looking at Michael, and I was having this complete out-of-body experience. It's a very physical feeling to be outside of your body, looking at yourself, just going, this is really weird. By this time, I'm now describing to Michael, I said, I'm looking down at my feet, and I can't feel my left foot. This is really weird. All of a sudden, I feel that traveling up my body. Honey, I can't feel my left leg, and this is just like really weird. So he's like, maybe you better go sit down. As I'm sitting down on the couch now, I can just feel my body is just shutting down in just a weird way that you can't describe because I've never had a stroke before. Yeah. So it was it was weird. But I'm looking at him. He's sitting across from me on the coffee table looking at me, and I'm looking at him in his eyes, just help me. That desperate, you look at somebody and cry for help because something's not right. Mm-hmm. And Michael's just looking at me and he's like, smile for me a little bit. So I smiled and was kind of talking, and my speech was just getting kind of slower and just kind of slurrier a little bit. And he's like, Karen, everything you're telling me you're having a stroke. I'm like, those are not words you want to admit to yourself.
Well, I'm impressed he knew that too.
That's what I said. I mean? A blessing that I was standing next to Michael.
Around you that doesn't just go
immediately.
Maybe you should go low down.
Didn't gaff me off. Yeah. I had the numbness. I had weakness. You could see it in my face, my leg, especially the left side of my body. It was very one-sided. I had trouble walking. Just all the signs. So he says, we're going to the emergency room. Now, we live out in Graham, and I'm from Los Angeles, so two completely different worlds. And he's like, I can get you to the hospital faster than calling 911 and getting somebody here and getting out there. Now, of course, that is not what we tell people. We tell people now to call 911. So I did it the wrong way, and I'll admit it, and certainly advocate. The ambulance
can go through the lights. They can go through everything.
Or if there was something that had happened to me in the car, he wouldn't have been equipped to handle it. Things like that people just assume, oh, I'll just drive it. It's not worth it. Yeah. It definitely is worth it. Call 911. So he, by this point, he says, Karen, let's just go get dressed, go put on sweats, whatever, and we're going to the hospital. Well, this time, poor Rita comes out of the room and has no idea what has just transpired in the course of 2 minutes. She lost her mom to a stroke, so this was really traumatic, and she'd only lost her about a year before. All of a sudden, Michael's saying, I think she's having a stroke. I had a really bad headache. As most stroke survivors will tell you, they have the worst headache of their life. And she says, do you want some aspirin? Another one of those blessings that I said. No.
I was just thinking the aspirin thing. Like, aren't you supposed to take aspirin within so much time?
For a heart attack, possibly, but not a stroke. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. So I said no, luckily. By this time, I start walking down to the bedroom. I couldn't walk. Michael had to physically pick me up, carry me out of the house, and put me in the car, and we went to the emergency room. Drove to the emergency room, and poor Rita is just freaking out watching this whole thing. Michael's freaking out because we're getting married in 4 months, and he's watching this all just transpire and sees me slipping away and is helpless. So we get to the emergency room, and Michael luckily says, she's having a stroke, which are key words to say when you're in the emergency room. Don't try to describe, she's having a headache and kind of not feeling well. Yeah. Those are kind of things that people maybe misdiagnose or
because of your age.
You're young, your age, it's stress.
Mm-hmm. Don't be dramatic.
Don't be dramatic. So luckily, saying those words, I was immediately having a CAT scan, and immediately the doctors there could see that I had a pool of blood in my brain. I was having a hemorrhagic stroke. Now, had I taken an aspirin, which would have thinned my blood, I would have bled out.
Oh, my gosh.
So luckily, I didn't take an aspirin, so it was definitely a blessing. Now, the majority of strokes that happen are blood clots, and then the rest of them, let's just say roughly 80 to 85%, and then the rest are hemorrhagic strokes. So just a ballpark. Now, what a stroke is, to give you a little bit of idea, it's like a heart attack in your brain. It's a brain attack. Most of the time with blood clots, it cuts off the circulation of blood to your brain. That's a blood clot stroke. The opposite of that would be a hemorrhagic stroke, which is like an aneurysm. An aneurysm is where your blood vessel balloons out. It's like filling up a water balloon with water. Until it pops. And now a popping of an aneurysm is what the blood would explode out into your brain, or like in your heart, for example. But for me, my hemorrhagic stroke was like filling up a water balloon with water. My blood vessel tore and bled, so it was like putting a water balloon on the ground and letting the water just flow out.
Oh, okay.
That's what happened with mine. The blood vessel tore, and then the blood just flowed out. So now I've got a pool of blood in my brain. It's behind my eyes, in the middle of my brain, just on the right side, so my left side was affected. It was near my thalamus. It was at a really sensitive, every place in your brain is sensitive, but a really sensitive spot. And all they could do was just watch that. And the hospital where I was not equipped for a stroke patient. They immediately called a helicopter, and I was airlifted to Harborview, where I spent 10 days in ICU at Harborview, having angiograms and watching to see if that pool of blood was getting any bigger. So luckily that pool of blood stopped, but they were watching that carefully to see if it was going to get worse or if they needed to do surgery.
Yeah.
So I was in ICU for 10 days, and then I was transferred back to the original hospital for inpatient rehab, followed by another month of outpatient rehab. Now, what happened to me was, because it was on my right side, I lost the left side of my body. And it's a very physical line, starting from the top of your head down, that separates the left side and the right side of your body. It's just like Brandi was saying, how, I didn't have blood pressure on my one side. I don't even know if it was your right or your left. However, I lost all the feeling in my left side. In March will be 5 years. I still can't feel my left side. To the touch, if you were to touch me, you can't feel it.
So it doesn't even come back after the stroke?
Well, every stroke is as unique as a thumbprint. So what happened to me may not have happened to somebody else, and vice versa. So everybody can have different side effects from a stroke. For me, what I have is I don't have fine motor skills in my left hand. If you see I'm trying to pick up a pen, it's very robotic.
Yeah.
It's really kind of crazy to watch. But I don't have fine motor skills. I don't feel my left side. I lost my lower left quadrant vision, because when my brain was swelling, making room for the blood, your vision is in the back of your brain, and that's pressing up against my skull. So I lost that immediately. We noticed that in the ICU from when the doctors were testing me. My gait was affected, and your gait, G-A-I-T, is when you're walking, and your stance and your flow, your right step, left step. So my gait is kind of off, just slightly. I still have a limp. I have pain. I don't have any feeling, but I have pain. Really kind of
like nerve damage almost.
I have nerve damage.
Which is horrible. I've had a car accident, and I always never understood nerve damage until you feel it, and then you realize that it's like that bad feeling when your foot falls asleep.
Exactly. The pins and the needles, and it's a feeling that you can't escape.
Yeah.
Which is, you get cold, you put on a coat. You get hot, you take your coat off. You have nerve damage, it is incredible.
It's just there. Yeah.
And so I have that. I take medication to lessen the pins and needles feeling, so I can deal with the pain more every day. But I'm in pain every day. Some days are worse than others, and it's just.
Now, when she knew about something when she was little, is this something that you knew about when you're younger, or yours came out of nowhere?
Mine came out of the blue. It just came out of the blue. Going back to that left and right thing, I guess the best way to describe everything that I lost, and you can relate to this, I describe it as the left side of somebody else's body is sewn onto the right side of mine. Because when I'm holding my hand, I can't feel it. It feels like I'm holding someone else's hand. So it is the most incredible feeling that, like you were saying,
it's a real disconnect.
It's a real disconnect.
You do feel split right down.
I am totally, I'm literally the left side of someone else's body is sewn on to the right side of mine. I can move my left side, but the connection between me moving it is my vision. I have to see that I'm picking up or trying to pick up this pen because I can't feel it. I have no idea where it is.
It's interesting because I always describe that from getting an epidural when you have kids, like how you watch a nurse move your leg and you go, that's weird. You know how you watch it? You go, that's my leg. But you don't feel it. But I understand like what you're saying. That's so bizarre.
And it's so, I understand trying to describe something to somebody that you can't even fathom. And, Michael says that too. He's like, I wish I could go through something just to experience, like an epidural, just to have that disconnect to understand and relate to you on that level. So, I had to learn to walk again. And like I said in the beginning of the story, this was 4 months prior to our wedding.
I was just curious, So
I had to learn to walk again for our wedding. And I remember asking the nurse in ICU, I'm getting married here in 4 months.
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to walk by then? And she's like, get up and do it.
Got to start.
And it was the best advice. It was one of those,
that's fantastic.
Well, I guess if she believes I could do it, I better start believing in myself.
Well, she didn't say no. You've gotten someone that goes, well.
No.
And they were kind of a pessimist about, well, you may not. I wouldn't bet on it. That kind of an attitude.
Yes.
It would have been harder for you mentally to wrap your head around it, I think.
And it was one of those immediate golden nugget gem of advice to say, well, get out and do it, which gave me that carrot to say, here it is. That's what I'm aiming for. And I've just had this just positive attitude since then, and trying to encourage others in their survival and their recovery and their
I think hearing just the stories from both of you, I think is great for women to hear, because they're hearing these symptoms, they're hearing these things that led up to what you both went through. And if they have a day where they sort of notice these things, they may think twice about blowing it off, like moms do, because you're like, hey, I got to pick the kids up at 3, I got to do this. You tend to blow things off. Now, Wear Red Day for the American Heart Association is Friday the 3rd. Tons of events going on around town. Now, they've got landmarks that are going to go red for the day: Bank of America, Fifth Avenue Plaza, CenturyLink Field, Macy's Downtown, Pacific Science Center Arches, Pike Place Market, Seattle Marriott Waterfront, One Union Square in downtown Seattle, the Westin Seattle. They're all going to go red for the day. There are some rallies in South Seattle on the 3rd, some salons, Salon Miro in Tacoma, Embellish in Tacoma, and also Daniel Ross Salon and Skincare, which is in Covington, where I live. So they're going to be offering like CPR and different screenings and things at those salons from 10 to 6. And I know you are, Brandi, aren't you going to be at an event with firefighters that day?
Yeah. It's going to be a really hard gig.
Yeah. Tell me where you'll be that day.
As a single girl, it's really a struggle for me to get out of bed that morning. But so we've got a couple of things going on in the Seattle area. And, the first one is on Friday, February 3rd. We've got something called Project Red Dress.
Okay.
It's the 4th year that we've been doing this. And it's kind of based on the Project Runway concept.
Okay.
And it's a pretty cool event. It's going to be Friday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Fairmont Olympic downtown. And we've got 12 student designers that are going to be coming in and designing red dresses, and various influential women in the Seattle area are going to be modeling them. Okay. One of them is Marnie Hughes from Q13 Fox News. She anchors the weekday evening news programs, and she's a fellow Go Red ambassador with us.
Oh, okay, great.
And so she's been a very active volunteer with the Heart Association for years.
And the website people can go to, the tickets are $25, but they can go to projectreddress.com for the tickets, correct?
Yeah, and the proceeds, part of it will go to the Heart Association, and then the winning student designer is going to also win a scholarship to help pay for their education. So it's a great event to come out and support. And then the next day, Saturday the 4th, we've got our Go Red Connect event, and that's the one you were talking about with the firefighters.
Yeah.
It's going to
Where will that be?
It's going to be at the Bellevue Macy's from 10 to 2, and what we're doing is kind of a passport to heart health. You can show up, get a passport at any of our 8 booths that we'll have throughout the Macy's store, and if you get them stamped at all 8 of the booths, you'll be entered into a drawing for a grand prize, I'm not sure how much it's going to be. I think it's a $200 to $250 Macy's gift card we'll be giving away. But each of the booths represents a part of heart health. So eating right, we're going to have nutritionists and recipes on hand. Fitness, we'll have personal trainers on hand. We have a stress reduction booth where we've got free chair massage. We've got learn the new hands-only CPR. That's going to be with firefighters, so that'll be a lot of fun. And we've got all sorts of different booths, and you can get free things at every booth. You can also enter in raffles to get larger prizes at many of the booths, and it's free to enter the raffles. And then we've got the grand prize will be given away at 2 o'clock. So.
Okay, perfect. Now, so it's Wear Red Day. It's going to be Friday, February the 3rd, just to to, just for everyone to just recognize this going on and to kind of make people aware of what's going on. The best website for people to go to, I would assume, is PugetSoundGoesRed.org.
Yes.
Where Red Day is this Friday, February 3rd. Thanks you guys so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Jackie.